appreciate your patience. I know we're running a few minutes late already. Hopefully I can talk really fast tonight. I'm Jennifer Wallace, and I'm an Assistant Director of Planning in the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury's Planning Department. I appreciate all of you being here tonight. This is a really exciting endeavor, and the staff has been working really hard to get us to this point. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce the Police Jury President. We have Guy Brame here with us tonight, and he's going to give you some welcome remarks.
I'm glad y'all can make it tonight. I appreciate y'all's time, and that y'all are here tonight, that you've taken the time out to be here. On behalf of the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out to this meeting for the Unified Development Code Review Panel. I'd also like to recognize some elected officials that are here with us tonight. We have Mr. Francis Andropont, we have Mr. Ellis Hassan, and Mr. Shannon Spell in the back there. And I believe that's it. With this meeting, we are beginning a very important process on unifying and updating our development code. Your input as panel members will be invaluable, as will the input from citizens who are in attendance. We very much appreciate your time and your interest. And thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. The next thing I would like to do, we have a number of staff members here that worked on this project, and I'd like for Mr. Crane to go ahead and kick off those introductions. I think you could probably pass it to Dane. Guy Brame playing the role of Vanna White. The next thing we'd like to do is start off with the panel members introducing themselves, and if you could also say the area of representation that you have.
Harvey Bassett, retired, representing the Southwest Louisiana Home Builders Association.
And I'm Philip Busby, just a private citizen. Russ Adams, I'm the Director of Planning and Development for Lake Charles.
Tommy Eastman, Southwest Louisiana Association of Realtors.
Jeff Cudlett, the American Institute of Architects, Southwest Louisiana.
John Lowry, Louisiana Engineering Society.
Wallace Nichols, developer in Moss Bluff area.
Matt Redd, developer.
Richmond Reinauer from the Realtor Association.
Calvin Thibodeau, representing Lake Charles Utility Coordinating Committee.
I'm Don Veroni with Heritage Builders, representing the Home Builders Association as well.
All right. Well, thank y'all so much for agreeing to participate. You know, we put a lot of thought into who needed to serve on this group. And to be honest with you, the group started out as being about a 7-member group. And the more we got into the work and the more we met with police jurors, it just became so evident that we needed to get more participation, and we really do appreciate all of you giving your time to be here. And hopefully we can be very respectful of your time and have some good focused discussion to move on. So the next item that we have on our agenda is for Brian Beam, our parish administrator, to go through a few slides with us.
Thank you, Jennifer. And let me second what Guy and Jennifer said. We sincerely thank each of you for being here. This is a very important group, a very important process, and it is a good example of when we get representatives with God here a little bit. I'm just going to take a few minutes. But I think probably more than anything else, any one thing that's affected development, especially in unincorporated areas in the last 20 to 30 years, is population and population shifts. And Tasha, if you'll go to my first slide, oh, you did, okay. This is very telling. If you go to 1970 on the far left, and it takes you through the latest 2010 census numbers, you will find that going back to 1970, 72.8% of the parish population was living inside the city. 27.2% unincorporated. You can see a steady growth. This is not coming through great on the screen, but this is a red. And if you look at the growth from 1970 to 2010, there's a tremendous amount of growth in unincorporated and essentially a little decrease and then flattening out in the cities. And that would be all the municipalities added together. This is actually a very telling statistic, and it probably explains a lot of why we're all here this evening. The reason I picked 1970, they'll get into more detail, but in 1974, Jimmy, if I'm not mistaken, that even predates Jimmy a little bit being here, the first subdivision ordinance was passed. So a lot of things have happened since that time, but to show you that things have changed, I think this sets a lot of the tone for why we're here. Next slide. This is the same information, but just showing you a little more focus in municipal populations. Again, 1970 to 2010, essentially flat, 0.5% growth. Compared to the unincorporated areas, 1970, we had about 40,000 people. Now we've got over 86,000, more than doubling for 118% increase. So what does that affect? Population shifts affect almost everything. Transportation is one, our road system, for example. And in each one of these bullets, I'm going to have the downside. Traffic is big. Think about all of the places where things get log jammed and so forth, but that's probably one of the main infrastructure things we deal with. Drainage. We've got a whole separate set of drainage studies that have actually been completed. There's a lot of work that's being done and will be done over the next few years, not just studies, but actual work to fix a lot of these problems. But a lot of the problems, not all, but most, are really preventable if we have the right standards in place. When it doesn't happen, we have flooding. Sewerage, of course, is probably our biggest challenge right now as far as a service that we don't generally provide in terms of big centralized systems, but that we're grappling with, and it's going on as we speak. But what's at stake? The water quality is at stake. We have untreated and undertreated sewerage going into ditches all throughout unincorporated Calcasieu by 30,000+ mechanical systems at each home. That's not a rural area. That's very subdivision oriented. Waterworks. There are several waterworks districts in unincorporated areas that are having capacity issues because of growth. When these were built, you have to remember a lot of them were small communities. They were on the outskirts of town, and they centered around what is a small community, and it's really straining their system. And I stopped with fire protection. There's a lot of others, but a lot of issues with volunteer fire departments. I don't know if the average citizen, most people maybe know, but a lot of people don't realize a lot of times when they're out in the unincorporated area, their fire protection is by volunteer fire departments. Maybe one paid staff, one or two. In not every case, some are more staff than others, but all of these deal with population shifts. There's a whole lot of other things that deal with the impact, but if you put them all together, we're talking about quality of life issues. Now, that term is used a lot, and I know it's sort of thrown out a lot, but you think about why somebody decides to stay and live here, or why somebody decides they're going to move here. And all of you around the table deal with these issues, whether you're in the realty field, or development, or city, or anybody. We want a quality of life, and these are the ones, plus others, local government deals with. We have to work together, private sector, public. But these are all quality of life issues. I believe we all have the same goal, to try to enhance that quality of life. Where the details come in, where we really need your help. And we're asking for your commitments. is to work through how do we get there. And that's an honest debate, and there's a lot of detail to go through in the next few meetings. But really, this is the broad view of why we're even here. And so I wanted to end with a little humor. But in 1974, when that first subdivision code was passed, rotary phones, some push button were there. Most people use Rolodexes and a fancy electric typewriter to send messages and a flip calendar. Now, I know for me and Jerry Miller's office, our finance director, he's not here tonight, but I'm going to pick on him. He still uses this. Maybe some of y'all do. And I didn't switch to one of these until about a year ago, but think about what's changed since 1974. This just sort of illustrates, if we don't have standards in place that reflect where we are now and where we want to go, does anybody really think we ought to be in 1974? Now, we've got codes since then, and I'm stealing a little Jennifer's thunder, but you've got a lot of codes that are all over our book, separated. They're not really convenient for people like y'all and others who need to have it all in one place, and it doesn't reflect the changes in population in unincorporated areas since the 70s. So this is a backdrop, and so I just wanted to mention that before we get into more of the detail and the orientation. Before I forget, I noticed Tony Stelly, Police Bureau, District 10, has joined us. Appreciate you coming, Tony. And that's all I've got. I'll hand it back to you.
Well, thank you. Go ahead and move this out of the way. Well, unfortunately, guys, I'm the only person left on the agenda to speak, and I'm going to try my best to talk fast. Y'all stop me if I'm talking too fast or if I'm getting crazy and y'all need clarification on something. Any big questions I'd like to ask at the start, that y'all maybe hold those to the end. We gave you some notepads and some pens so y'all can jot down ideas. But if you want a minor clarification, we can go ahead and take care of that during the presentation. If you could flip to the next slide, just to give you an overview of what we're going to do tonight. This is just basically an orientation meeting. Hopefully it will be the only one where I do most of the talking. In the future meetings, we want you guys to really give us the input. But we're going to talk about what a UDC is exactly, why we need it, what are the goals that we have set forth, what are the key changes that are in the document, what are our next steps, and then we want to close up tonight with your turn, where you can maybe process some of the information we've talked about and tell us a goal that you have by participating. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. So what is a UDC? And I know that a lot of you were really pushing for us to get this out, and I know that there's one gentleman in particular that was just ready to get his hands on it, Matt Red. I mean, it would have been a Christmas present to him if I could have gotten that in December, but hopefully once you guys got the document, you were able to see that we really did a lot of work on this. Our very first draft was probably about 75 pages, and just as we went through and saw how intertwined our codes are, we just realized that it had to grow and grow. And ultimately, we did put together, I have this illustration I want to show you guys. This is Calcasieu Parish's Code of Ordinances. This is all of the laws that the police juries passed. And all of these green tabs are development related. So you can see what we've been dealing with all these years. And it wasn't until we sat down and looked at it page by page that we realized that we really needed to get something that was better suited for. So the UDC combines all of these codes into one document. That's just the simple definition. It's actually something that we're starting to see more and more throughout the country, but just in Louisiana, we have East Baton Rouge Parish has adopted one. They adopted it many years ago, and they actually update it every year or two. St. Tammany Parish recently adopted one, Ascension Parish, and then Bossier City has a Metropolitan Planning Commission that deals with Bossier City and then a certain radius outside the city limits, and they're operating under a Unified Development Code. So this isn't some new idea that we came up with. It's just a model that we felt like would be good for us to use here. So we hope with this UDC that we're going to improve our customer service. Hopefully it will be easier for the staff to navigate through. It'll be easier for developers to navigate through and general citizens. It's hopefully going to give us a consistent application of the regulations, because we deal a lot with the engineering department, our public works people, and some of the codes like zoning and subdivision are very important, high priority ordinances for the planning department, but in the engineering department, Tim's focus may be more on drainage. But when we put it all together, it elevates everything to a certain level of importance, and it keeps our reviews consistent. It also ensures coordination of reviews because in the document, it calls for the staff to come together to review significant projects so we can work together and make sure we're addressing all the important issues. And then we'll have one complete set of definitions rather than the 17 or so that you see. And I know this is really small. I apologize for that. We did have it up on the wall so it was bigger, and technical difficulties caused us to put it here. But this is a list of all the ordinances that we've consolidated into that document. And I know you can't see, but the subdivision ordinance was 1974. Municipal airport hazard zoning was 1977. Zoning 1980. And most of these ordinances have been amended over the years. And just to go back to this book, just the subdivision ordinance alone, I'm not sure if you can all see this, but this section right down here shows all the times the subdivision ordinance has been amended since 1974. So we've never taken that comprehensive approach to our ordinances. And my thing is, how much has the parish changed since 1974? I know that Brian pointed out some of our population figures, but when I moved here in 1989, only about a third of the roads in Calcasieu Parish were paved. And today, 95% of our roads are paved. So just that one change alone should warrant us stepping back and saying, let's make sure that we're where we need to be with our code. And, the list goes on. I had a staff member pull the number of lots that we've approved, the number of subdivisions we've approved, and it's just astronomical how much things have changed in Calcasieu Parish, and our ordinances just haven't kept up. Vision Calcasieu. We're not going to spend a lot of time in these meetings talking about Vision Calcasieu. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not. It was a planning process that the police jury began in 2008, and we were trying to take a comprehensive approach to planning. And we looked at a number of areas: wastewater, various infrastructure, economic development, coordination between the various service districts that we have. And one of the big issues that came up from some of the people that weren't in favor of the plan, and a couple of those people are here tonight if they want to correct me, but I think one of the issues was that there was concern about how a comprehensive plan would be implemented. And the comprehensive plan had lots of big picture ideas in it. It was meant to look 20, 25 years down the road and say, how do we want Calcasieu Parish to be then? But we as a staff understand that we have to take smaller steps. So what we did is we backed off of the plan, and with the Planning and Zoning Board's blessing and the police jury's blessing, we went ahead and got to work on the codes to show you a glimpse of how a plan would be implemented. So we do need to mention it here, although this discussion is not about Vision Calcasieu, it's just about these laws that we're proposing. So, let's talk about our goals. So, from the panel perspective, what we'd like to get from you guys, the first thing, the most important thing, and it'll probably be the most challenging, is we'd like for you to read it from cover to cover. And I promise you, I've read it twice from cover to cover recently. It can be done. Yeah, I can't help you with the how, but I'm telling you, it can be done. And it is very, very important, because the last thing that we would want to do is get all the way through the process and have the police jury adopt something and then have somebody say, oh, hold on, I didn't know that was in there. So please, your first instruction is to read this from cover to cover. I gave you, when this was delivered to you, key components. It's 3 pages with 12 key components. These are the major new concepts and changes that are proposed in the document. The bulk of it is actually existing. I want you to thoroughly review those key components. Take that summary, flip to the pages and the sections that are shown, and really read that. These binders, at some point when we present a new draft, we're going to need these binders back from you to replace pages as changes are made. But for the most part, they're yours. Feel free to write in it. Take these Post-it notes home. highlight it, do whatever you need to, but please make sure that you very much review those. Then we want you to come back and provide input on these components. And I know Mr. Thibodeau has some concerns about an item that's not on this list. He has a concern about our specifications on how we want roads to be built within new subdivisions. So at a later date, we're going to ask you to propose those ideas to us. So that'll be an outcome that you have when you read the document. If there's something that's not on the list, that's been on the books for 20 years and you want to change it, you'll have your chance here to discuss it. Then we'll need technical comments. So that's from our home builders, our developers, our subdivision folks, our engineers. We asked you to be on here so that you could give us that expertise and tell us where we're off base. I'm looking at the staff, and I think a couple of us might have worked in the private sector for a little while, but for the most part, we're government bureaucrats. You know, we're going to admit that. You are the practitioners, and you have insight that we really need to help us through this process. Excuse me. The goals of the staff. We're here to facilitate the discussion. We want to give you clarifications, explanations, how we came up with that number, those sorts of things. And then we're going to catalog your input. We do have CGov here with us tonight. They're going to record all of this information, and we also have some note takers here to write down the main ideas so that we can provide that input to our decision makers, our planning and zoning board members and police jurors. Now, I would ask that if you find any typos or if you have suggestions on wordsmithing, that we maybe reserve that for a different conversation. Maybe we could get together privately, or you could email those things to me, because this is a lot of information to cover, and I think that if we focus on the minor things, we might not be able to get through the whole document efficiently. So our ultimate goal is to have a refined document, which means that we're going to take your input and we're going to make changes to the document accordingly. And then we're going to take it to the Planning and Zoning Board, the staff will, for them to review it, take action on it, and then depending on how the outcome is at the Planning and Zoning Board, we'll go to the police jury for final action. We want to do that by the end of this year. And just to back up, for those of you that may not know, back in 2008, when we were working through the planning process, the police jury adopted the interim development ordinance. I know that Harvey, you reviewed it really thoroughly. And at the end of 2010, that document just went away. It expired. And the police jury felt like it was important enough to extend 4 provisions that were in that document. And those 4 were the subdivision procedures that allow us to approve minor subdivisions administratively, some extra drainage waivers that help developers to not have to do so much of an in-depth analysis, minimum level of service standards regarding sewer and water service, and then vesting requirements is basically the grandfather clause. The police jury extended that in January until June 30th. So the staff has now been able to complete this document, and the police jury saw fit to extend it until the end of this year so that we can get the appropriate amount of comments in from the public. All right. So now we're ready to dive in. Is there any questions about any of that? No? All right. The first thing I want to bring your attention to is the land use matrix. And just to let you know, the way I've structured the PowerPoint is we have the location of the document if you'd like to look it up, and then each slide has the Y on it. But I'll go into more detail. With some of these I have examples. But if you could just flip to the next one. This is an excerpt from our existing zoning ordinance. And as you can see, the type is very small. We didn't change anything. And if I want to see where I can build a single-family detached house, which is basically just a stick-built home, I have to go through all of this text, and there it is in single-family residential zoning. Now, a lot of you probably know that already, but if you think of it as an outsider that doesn't know anything, how easy is that going to be to find? I think it's pretty difficult. So what we've proposed in here, if you could flip to the next slide, is more of a table. And the way we started with this is we moved every one of those existing uses that was shown in the text into this table. Some of the things we added, and modified. Some are actually much more flexible. In commercial, we just basically put a retail outlet, and the use is actually determined by the size. So it actually makes it a little bit more flexible, and we think it's much easier to understand because if you look here, these things we call permissions. So if there's a P in this column, it's a permitted use in that zoning. If it's an A, then it's permitted through administrative relief. It might have an E for exception. If it has an X, then it's prohibited, and you need to do a rezoning. If it has an S, there's some supplemental conditions attached to it. So if you can flip to the next one. This is something else that we added. Yeah. This code system was adopted by the American Planning Association in 2001. It's an industry standard. It's not something that we made up on our own, and you can actually, if you wanted to, you could go to the planning website and access it there. But what this does is it provides us with a consistent set of definitions. We do have a number of definitions in the code, but just to give you an example, you want to build a thingamajig manufacturing facility, and all we have in our code is a definition for a widget manufacturing facility. We could go to the LBCS and see what the definition of widget manufacturing is, and if it says that thingamajig manufacturing is the same, then we put those together. So there's a consistency in the permission. And on top of that, these codes can be inputted into our permitting process. And let's say we have a storm 10, 15 years down the road, and we need it for disaster recovery. We can go through and input that code into our permit system and find out exactly how many thingamajig manufacturing facilities we have. That can help us with recovery. It can help us get grant funding and things like that. So it really doesn't change much in the uses. It's just a very helpful tool that we have. Traditional neighborhood development. Before we start talking about this, I want to make sure that everyone is very clear that this is an optional land use district. It's completely up to the developer. And to get this, the developer would have to come into our office and file for a rezoning. It would have to go before the Planning and Zoning Board and the police jury before it was ever enacted. So I don't want anyone to think when they see the picture that it's something that's required. But if you could just flip to the next slide. T&D is sometimes what this is called, and examples of it are River Ranch in Lafayette and Graywood here in Lake Charles would be two good examples. And again, it's purely optional for the developer, and it's intended for large-scale developments that won't be built out for 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And the beauty of this is that it doesn't tie a developer down to a specific site plan. Now, obviously, when you come in, you would have to give us some sort of site plan, and we would verify that it meets certain parameters, that it has the amount of open space, the density mix is appropriate, it's pedestrian-oriented, those types. But once it's approved, just for example, this is a church right here in open space. Let's say the developer starts building it, and he says, oh, no, that's not the right place for it. I need to put this building there. Well, he doesn't have to come back before us for a hearing. He can just do it as long as he meets the parameters of what's in the ordinance. So we think it'll give those long-term developers certainty, and it will help them to plan out for a long future for their development. All right, next slide. Flexible design corridors. This actually, design corridors were included in the interim development ordinance. They went away when the IDO expired. They have not been reenacted by the police jury, but we did include them in this document because the staff felt like they were important. One problem that we did find when they were enacted in the interim development ordinance is that they weren't very flexible. Can you flip to the next slide? These design corridors weren't intended to be overreaching. We felt like it was just a few measures that could really elevate the standards on gateway corridors into the community. Gulf Highway near the airport is one. Highway 171, Highway 378 in Moss Bluff. We felt like those were important for us to put our best face on, especially for visitors or businessmen that fly into the airport or developers that may want to locate here. And this signs now is on McNeese Street, and it's an example of something that we feel like could fit into the design corridor. I wanted to show you this just to show you that we're not asking for the Taj Mahal. We're just asking for a little bit something special. This has the landscape, it has the low-profile monument sign, it has the bricks on the front and the windows, some of the parking is in the rear. So this is what we want to see. But we understand that on these corridors, a lot of these lots are long established. And they may not be the typical size that we see every day. So what we did in the Unified Development Code is we allow for an alternative request. And what that basically says is if you're building and you have a lot constraint that doesn't allow you to meet the parking in the front requirement, just for example, you could come to us as a staff and file an application. If it's a minor application, the staff, Jimmy Vickers, could approve it on his own after a thorough review. If it's a major request, then it would have to go through the advertising process and things like that, but the decision would be made by an alternative review team. And this is very similar to what we have that's existing in the Nelson Road District and the Lake Street District. So we didn't reinvent the wheel. That team consists of 2 police jurors, one of which would have to represent that area, 2 planning and zoning board members, one of which has to represent the area, and the director of planning and development. So we hope that it builds flexibility into these elevated standards while still maintaining something to make the community just a little bit fresher and a little bit better. This is my favorite. This is very near and dear to my heart, and I hope that y'all feel the same. I can get you to flip to the next slide. Secondary dwelling units. My mother, she lives in New Iberia, so she's not going to see any of this. She's 64 years old. I know she would choke me if she heard me saying that. But she's a New Iberian, and she's single. What am I going to do as she starts to get older? And what if she can still live independently? I don't want to put her in a nursing home. I don't know that I can afford assisted living. So this might be my only option. And this is a local example. It's actually in University Place right behind Dalby Elementary. So if any of you want to ride by and look at it. The house is about 2,000 square feet, and they built a mother-in-law cottage in the back that's about 900 square feet. So within the UDC, we would allow these types of development without a hearing, just as long as that secondary dwelling is secondary to the primary, and we cap it at 1,200 square feet, which we think would be good. And it would help our aging population as well as maybe if your college student graduates and needs to get on their feet, they could move back home. So I think it's something that's really important. I hope you agree. Now we get to the really fun stuff. Adult uses. I don't know if any of you kept up with the news, but probably about a year ago, 6 months ago, the police jury had an issue come before it. If you could flip. I know this is a bad picture. I apologize for the quality. But this is an adult club that located in an existing building on I-10 at the Toomey Starks exit. And the police jury had to approve their liquor license. And we had so much opposition to this. And basically the police jury's hands were tied because our ordinance is silent on these types of uses. So when this came before us, we had to treat it just like every other bar. If a novelty shop came to the police jury, we'd have to treat it just like every other retail establishment. So within the UDC, we put some provisions in there that say that these types of uses can only be in heavy industrial zoning. And it's very similar to something that the city of Lake Charles enacted a while back. And we'll definitely talk more about that, but we have checked on the legality of it. And there's a legal precedent in Louisiana that says that you have to have at least 5% of your land available for these types of uses. And we actually have just over 5% of our land is heavy industrial. On the supplemental use conditions, this is something that we definitely need a picture for. You could flip to that exhibit. I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm sorry. I know many of you know what a borrow pit is. But for those of you that don't, Anytime you dig a pond and you take the dirt off of the property, it's considered to be a borrow pit. In this case, this is in Moss Bluff. The gentleman that owns this property wanted to build a pond for fishing and recreational use, and I think you can tell by the aerial photography that it's a beautiful piece of land, and he really did a quality development. But the property wasn't zoned appropriately. The only zoning where you can dig a borrow pit by right is heavy industrial zoning. So we had to take him before the Planning and Zoning Board so he could dig this pond. And the Planning and Zoning Board is typically going to impose 12 or so stipulations, and those are all in your book if you want to look at it later. And what we're saying here is we want the police jury to impose those same stipulations on every borrow pit, whether you have to go before the Planning and Zoning Board or not. This would basically level the playing field. And we have some provisions in there, not just for borrow pits, that's just an example of it, but we also have some in there for drive-through establishments, for stacking capacity. If somebody wants to build a gun range, we have some supplemental conditions. So that way everybody is doing the same thing. The staff doesn't have to remember that we did a zoning case 10 years ago and pull that to look at it. Next slide. Large-scale retail. This is something that only applies to developments of 75,000 square feet or more. And just as an example, this is your typical Walmart. And I use this example because 75,000 square feet has to be a big building like these. And if you could flip to the next picture, this is what we want to see. And what we're asking for with these regulations is that these buildings would have multiple entrances and would design their wiring in such a way that it could be easily subdivided. Because we know these Walmarts come in and they grow, and next thing you know, they're down Nelson Road, and you're looking at a vacant building. And we're hoping that by imposing these regulations, that it will be easier to reuse and redevelop these buildings in the future. Next slide. Landscaping, buffering, and screening. Some of this was actually in previous ordinances. We did have landscape and screening provisions in both the Nelson Road Overlay District and the Lake Street Overlay District that were adopted probably around 2004, 2005. And then when we passed the interim development ordinance to the police jury, it also had a landscape requirement in it. And the landscaping was for parking lots, the frontage. We also had screening in there. So buffering is completely new. Okay, you can flip to the next one. So what this ordinance does is it consolidates all three of those landscape codes into one code. So we no longer have those three separate divisions. Everything's the same. Level the playing field, keep everything consistent. The screening is all going to be the same. And the buffering was added in, and you can see down here, this is in deep woods. And this is probably not the best example, but what we really want to see out of buffering is that we can increase the range of uses that are available on a piece of property through buffering. Say, for example, we have a piece of property that just happens to have a house next door to it. And the developer wants to do something. It's easier for the staff to approve that or recommend that to the zoning board if we can have a nice buffer that's going to screen sound and dust, light, things like that. So we're really trying to open up some doors with this. Non-conforming situations is, there's no picture with this, I apologize. This is where we kind of get boring. We have a small section on non-conforming uses within the existing zoning code. It's not very clear, and we had some concerns that it wasn't certain enough. So we would want you guys to review this and give us some input on it. It's separated into non-conforming lots, non-conforming uses, non-conforming sites, and it's actually more flexible than our existing code. Just for example, if you have a house that's in commercial zoning and it burns down to the ground today and you come into us to get your permit, according to the law, we're not supposed to give you that permit because of the non-conforming situation. But in the Unified Development Code, it actually makes it more flexible where you can do that by right. I mentioned the Development Review Committee earlier. It was set up by the Interim Development Ordinance. And the way it was set up in the Interim Development Ordinance is every permit application was supposed to go before a staff team. And that staff team was the Public Works Director, the Parish Engineer, a few of us from the Planning Department, and we could call in ex officio members, the Health Unit, DOTD, as needed. But when we got into it with the IDO, we realized that we really didn't have to review everything through this staff team. So what's proposed in here is that the police jury reenact the Development Review Committee with this staff team, but they only come together on big projects. And the definition of big projects is if you have to have a drainage study or a traffic study, if you need some type of variance. And then on those smaller projects, if we feel like we need input from the engineering department or the public works department, we can handle those on a case-by-case basis. But we really want to expedite the smaller projects, but make sure we have ample review on the big ones. This is something I'm really excited about. In the administrative manual, I just want to flip to this. This is something that we've never really had. But you see there's a whole section that has all the application information. It has checklists on what you need. It tells you all the steps that your request will have to go through. And we've even got a little flow chart that'll help walk you through this process. Initially, I think this will be a big help to the staff as we work through this document because it will change our procedures somewhat. But I think that the biggest winner here is the public because we'll have all of this information on the website. So if a gentleman in Washington, D.C. wants to build a factory down here, he can go to our website and find out exactly what he needs to get his permit, what steps he has to go through. So we think this is really going to simplify things for the public. The purpose statements in the various sections, it's really kind of a no-brainer, but our existing ordinance doesn't have any definitions as to what is single-family residential. What's mixed residential. So this document gives us purpose statements that we can go to as a staff and say, well, does this zoning request fit into the intent of that zoning? And it will help decision makers, our planning and zoning board members, our police jurors, to hopefully have a good legal foundation on why and how they make decisions. I want to talk to you just a little bit. This is one of the last slides about some general changes. And I mentioned to you in the memo that I sent you that I wanted y'all to focus on the red text. And there's a lot of red text. When y'all flip through it, I'll admit there's a lot of red text. But I want you to keep in mind that just because it's red text does not mean that it's new. And just if we use landscape, for example, we had those 3 different landscape ordinances. Well, that's going to be struck through, and then the new consolidated ordinance is going to be read. So it's not necessarily new, it's just different. We have the same issue with some formatting. We rephrase some things. There were a lot of cases where we tried to make the decision maker consistent. So if it said that the assistant director of planning had the authority to make a decision, now it says director, but director means director or designee. So there's a lot of changes in here that even though they're red text, they're not going to have a big impact on the way you do things. We added some graphics. I hope everybody enjoys those. If you have suggestions on how to make them better, we definitely want to hear that. And then, again, we consolidated all of our definitions and we added some. When we went through that land use matrix, we realized that a lot of things that were existing in our text were not defined. So you're going to see a number of new definitions. So what are our next steps? And this is something that we might need to discuss. If you want to discuss it, nod your head, we'll get you a microphone. But what the staff is proposing here is that we meet 3 more times. May 31st, which is Tuesday. We would meet here again, same location, same time, and obviously we'll send you an email with all the information. At this meeting, the staff would give you more detail on each of these key components that I've mentioned tonight. And hopefully at that time, you'll get to hear somebody else talk. We also want to identify any other items that need discussion. That's where Mr. Thibodeau would want to bring up his specifications, if there's anything else that you all have in mind that needs to be discussed. discussed. I know Mr. Nichols probably has a couple things on his mind. We would want you to bring it up May 31st, and then when we come back on June 20th, we'll have an agenda of all those items that need to be discussed, and we'll handle those one by one. We want to, on June 20th, we want to come back and make sure we've completed our discussions on those key components. And then on July 18th, we hope after all this discussion that we can update your draft with a more refined version and hopefully have a comfort level that we can move on. We possibly may need to get more input from developers. Maybe we need to have focus groups with developers, maybe with home builders, maybe with the realtors, and we can certainly do that. But I think our next steps after July 18th are going to be decided throughout this process. But for now, these are the 3 meetings that the staff is proposing. And those, May 31st is a Tuesday, June 20th is a Monday, and July 18th is a Monday. So is there anybody that has any initial comments on that? Do we feel comfortable with that at this time? Okay. So our next steps after the July 18th meeting, we'll refine the draft. We'll meet with other folks as we need to get more information. Once everybody feels comfortable with it, we're going to present it to the Planning and Zoning Board. They're the first step. And the Planning and Zoning Board is going to make a recommendation to the police jury. Then the police jury will hear the presentation, they'll review the document, and they'll decide if they want to adopt it or if they don't. And again, we want to try to do that before the end of the year. I do want to remind everybody that we do want all the comments that we can get. If people go to our website, it's cppj.net. They can access the document and the supplemental information on the planning page under Proposed Unified Development Code. So now, it is your turn. And I actually talked really fast. So, I'm going to pass the microphone around. Who wants to start? Okay, and what we want to know is what you want to accomplish out of this process. If there's something near and dear to your heart that you really want to visit and talk about, and what's your main goal for being here?
Sure. Thank you, Gina. First of all, great job. A lot of hard work there. And I know you said it was a team effort. I'm sure it was, but normally when people say team effort, that means they've done a lot of the work. So, good job.
We all have.
Going to the main goals here, you know, as a home builder association, we're always concerned that we can build homes that are affordable for folks. I do love, in principle, the way this thing's laid out, and the idea is that it's going to be all in one easy-to-find document. That's really, I guess, our main concern is to be able to. We want things to look nice. You know, in extreme would be. There would be a development that would be absolutely beautiful, but not so dense of homes, and therefore the property value would potentially cause the home value to be tough for some folks. On the other hand, some folks like that. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. And you're the current president, right, of the Home Builders? Thank you.
Yes, Calvin Thibodeau, one of the goals, or many goals, we want with the Unified Development Code is to ensure that we're working with the developers, which we do on a daily basis, is making sure that the utilities in place are also protected. We also know that in some of the changes in the code, that the code requirements also address the utilities as well to make sure that there's something down the line that's going to create an interference or create a safety hazard or decrease the reliability of our infrastructure or facilities in place. So we're definitely looking forward to working through this and the future changes.
Right. And you were with a consolidated utility group also.
Yes, that's correct. I'm with the Utility Coordinating Committee, and basically we cover the Southwest Louisiana, and I work for Energy.
Well, good deal. Thank you.
I don't really have anything prepared about what exactly all my goals are, but I can say, I think off the top of my head, and after talked with several people in the room and others, probably like most of you all, I'm a longtime member of the community who is interested in playing a role in shaping how we move forward. And we were concerned about the last document, and I hope that with some input from some other like-minded folks about the parish, we can create such a document that all of us will be proud of, and then we can go forward on. And that's about it.
Thank you.
Like Richmond, I'm just, my goal would be to make sure any changes are affordable for whomever is doing the development. And just, were the other municipalities asked to attend this besides the city of Lake Charles?
The city of Lake Charles actually approached us about participating. It is an open meeting, so we would be happy to have any of the other
I
groups.
just think it'd be a good idea to encourage the other municipalities to be here.
I don't really have anything at this time. I'm very impressed with it. I did go through it to say I read it completely. It would be dishonest, but it certainly looks very interesting, and I realize how much time y'all have put into it. Looks good.
I don't have anything prepared either. I think anything I can do to assist, but make it easier for the public, homeowners, builders, to understand the process, a deliberate process, and fair to everyone.
Well, from an engineering perspective, we really need your input, so we're very much glad you're here.
Thanks. I'm flattered to have an opportunity to be part of the process of establishing these ordinances. It seems more often than not when I'm doing work in different municipalities or jurisdictions that the codes are basically the same. I think there's a company out there called Codes R Us that municipalities buy and readily adopt. And those ordinances, they don't necessarily reflect or address real situations. I think it's good boilerplate stuff, but typically the governing body will adopt them, and that's it. And we end up in variance process, which I've gotten comfortable with over the years, but it's nice to see you invite all of us to the table to have a part in it. As an architect, I am often the interpreter between the ordinance, the governing body, and the client. And I think this is all good stuff. We can see a lot of examples around the parish where we've painted ourselves in the corners or let things go willy-nilly. And it's never too late to try to get things on the right track. So I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you.
I think that I agree with everybody. I think one of my main goals is for there to be a plan, a general plan. Like, is there going to be sewer in that subdivision over there in 2022? And to make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot with the regulation and realizing exactly what we are. Because if we're making it too expensive on the front end, it's not going to happen on the back end. And for us to work with the city on zoning issues as well.
We look forward to it. I'm really pleased to be here because the city needs to go through a similar sort of exercise, and it's going to be a great opportunity for me to get my feet wet in this. I also have had an opportunity to look through it a little bit, and I really appreciate the effort that you've made in providing the kind of administrative flexibility to what you're doing here. So thanks very much.
Well, I'm just really intrigued by the process and seeing how someone as a private property owner, in the parish, what kind of input I can have, to help advance this process forward. In my professional background and what I do every day, I'm very process oriented. So I'm glad to see tables, and try to, to help people understand, make things more clear for people to really get what all this is about. And I'm appreciative to be a part of the process. I'm looking forward to seeing just how my perspective is going to help advance this. So,
Glad you're here.
Well,
I guess my main goals would be simplicity and consistency. And I think this would apply not just to us as developers or realtors or builders, but also to the staff and to the jurors that ultimately make the final decisions. And I think if we can have a consistent document that's usable and user-friendly, I think we've done a great task.
Well, hopefully we've done that. Well, oh, you could just put them right now. Does anybody have any questions about anything, or if you want to wait until next visit when we go into more detail, or if you want to give me a call or an email? All right. Well, we have some time. I know that there's some folks in the audience. Is there anyone that would like to give comment? Okay, I'm going to start the timer now. Yeah. Yeah. Charlie, you get 2 minutes, but Jeff gets 5.
I always appreciate the opportunity to make some comments on behalf of the public, and I appreciate you guys tolerating me very well. But having said, what's been said on behalf of the public, we'd be remiss to not maybe balance the discussion a little bit. So I'd like to just offer some public opinions relative to some of this presentation. Like when you talk about the impacts of population shifts, well, part of that, we believe is driven by people who felt like they might possibly be safer out in the parish. And another part of it, believe it or not, they felt like they could succeed from the union. They felt like they would, they just didn't like government being so involved in their daily lives in the municipality, so they moved out into the parish. Well, what's happening, that's all changed with them, and I'm not certain that, the people in the parish, I don't know that they understand what's happening to them, but from the way they voted, it took so many tries to get those taxes passed. I think they're understanding better that it's going to get worse in the parish than it is maybe in the municipalities. But rural people, for the most part, they feel like they're being dictated to. They feel like it's about power and control of government to the people. And they're always concerned that government wants to set a standard of living for the rural people that maybe they can't afford and they have to live by, but yet they don't feel like they really had any say in it. At the end of the day, what we're talking about is people giving up their individual property rights. I don't care any way you cut it, it's giving up their personal freedoms about their property and giving up their property rights. And what you have to do is somehow balance that with some benefits. But history has shown that really, for the most part, that protection really hasn't happened for most people. So that, there's a concern there. I mean, we were basically raised that you could do anything with your personal property and your real estate that wasn't prohibited by law. Make no mistake about it, guys. This has changed. It's changed to where you can't do anything with your real estate or your personal property unless you're allowed to in writing by ordinance. You may not understand that, but I understand it because that's the way it's explained to me. And so I have a real concern when you have something. I mean, they can basically tell you that you have to only have one barbecue pit and put it where the site plan says. That's the extreme. But that's the way this thing is going.
Well, Charlie, I just want to jump in there.
Hmm?
And I know you were listening so intently that you heard that part about the original subdivision ordinance being adopted in 1974. And actually, this document moves us backwards to more flexibility,
Well,
in my opinion.
And that was one
So
of the comments
ultimately,
that,
we're trying to find the balance.
but this is one of the comments that I did want to make, is that, even though it appears a lot of Vision County is incorporated in this, the people of the parish are very appreciative that, like you started off with, you're going back and you're revisiting this whole issue. And you are taking a lot of the issues that were brought up at some of the public meetings before, because when I read through it, I could see where, believe it or not, I said, well, they did listen, because they did incorporate a lot of things in there. But what I would ask that as you go through this, you be conscious that, like with the landscaping and stuff, that you don't do anything that's going to facilitate crime or reduce safety to the people. And I saw where that was covered in some of the, in the beginning of this thing. But again, we appreciate, you revisited it with a lot of the things that you pointed out, those 12 items that you start off with when you look on the website, you start off with that. So we do appreciate the people here taking their time today and through the duration of this whole thing to look at it as the homeowners in the rural areas do, because the people in the rural areas, for the most part, they feel like what's happening is things are being dictated to them and they don't have a say or a voice in it. I mean, if it's left up to them, they want to vote on it. But again, we appreciate each one of you that's looking after their best interests. Thank you.
Let me say I'm not going to speak for everyone here today, so I will. I'd like to address the board for just a moment. You folks have been charged with a tremendous challenge. My experience on the police jury for the last 19 years is that you can't please everybody, so you have to please the majority. That's where it lies. Jennifer and I have disagreed on some issues in the past, but we have remained friends, and I think that's very important. My position is very clear. If you're going to shoot from the hip, pretty well tell it like it is. You don't have to agree with me, but I will tell you my views, and I'll tell you where I'm coming from. I'm going to read, I haven't read this thing yet because I've been busy, but I intend to read it from cover to cover. My decision will be based primarily on what you people here today decide in the direction that we have to go in. I may not agree with it, but you're going to put in a lot of time, and a lot of hours, and a lot of thought. And I have to respect that. I really do. We are 15 police bureaus. We don't always agree, but 8 people run this parish. 8 people who vote yes run this parish. So it's important from my perspective to tell you today to not take this lightly. There are a lot of people who are going to be affected both positively and negatively on the decisions you make. Decisions you make are going to be given to me. Ultimately, the police bureau will make the final decision on this. Jennifer has worked real hard over the years, and I truly respect her. I appreciate her, and she knows what she's doing. But I mainly want to tell you here this afternoon, don't take this lightly. Thank you very much.
David Connor, also with the Planning and Zoning Board, as I said earlier. Our board, I guess, and again, I'm not speaking for anybody but me, in my perspective of how we have to handle decisions about land use in that board. But from my perspective, I think those ordinances that are sitting in that black book are probably the right things at the right time and have come together as a compiled document. But I can tell you, in making those decisions, decisions month in and month out. It really worries me that we don't have a good, consistent way of making those decisions. And sometimes it's whoever makes the better argument before us. Sometimes it's a situation how someone might feel at any given time. What I'm looking for, and that might come out of this body and come to us, is a document that will allow us to make consistent decisions. Easier to interpret. We have to deal with gray area. We've got to deal with things that are not written necessarily in those ordinances. So the more that is written, the less our job, the less cumbersome those decisions are, and that's what we're really going to need at the board level, particularly to take care of our citizens in a consistent manner, fair manner. So let's hope that comes out of this. Very excited about what I see in the content of this board and what kind of input we might have. So it's a great document. It looks good so far. I like the fact that black book is that thick and the other one's a lot less. It looks like less government to me, just by looking at those two books.
Mr. Anderpont and Mr. Atherton already touched on the subjects that were dear to my heart. But when the time comes to get the word out to the unincorporated area, I would ask planning and zoning to make an extraordinary effort to make sure the general public in the unincorporated area is aware of what's going on.
We'll do our best. Anybody else?
One thing I asked you today, when I called you, if you can, put it on the main calendar, that's where I went to first, and I have it on the back page. A lot of people don't know where to go look for it.
We can do that, especially now that we know
Arrange
this
to put it on the main calendar, Mr. Calendar, and, gentlemen, we really do appreciate what y'all do.
I just want to echo a thank you to the people serving on this committee and echo Mr. Andrew Pond's words that what y'all are doing is very, very important. I would like to say, however, that balance is going to be very, very important here. It is my hope as an elected official that I can be present during this process and be involved with it. The actual state law was mentioned previously, but what state law says is that a proprietor may do whatever they wish with their property as long as it does not deprive their neighbor from the liberty of enjoying theirs or causing any damage. And I just want to share today that as an elected official, the majority of calls that I receive that are very directly related to zoning issues are from neighbors calling to complain about what their neighbor is doing. It's not government going out there wanting to tell everybody what to do. It's government trying to respond to concerns expressed by the citizens that they represent. And that's what planning and zoning is. It's trying to balance that. And so I would just ask this committee, again, as Mr. Andrew Pond stated, take this very seriously because what you're doing is very, very important. And I really hope that we achieve a balance because really what we're trying to do is prevent neighbors from harassing each other so much. And so we can all get along and live together in a great community and things develop and proceed. We want developers to be profitable with what they do, but we also want the community to enjoy the environment that's being developed. So I look forward to working with everyone. And once again, I thank you for committing and volunteering your time to serve in this process. Thank you.
Is there anybody else that has a question or comment? Yes.
For probably 45 years, I've been blessed to work and operate within Calhoun Parish, the 5-parish area, and the cities that surround it. I hope all of us realize what an outstanding blessing we have had in having the administrators and consistency of our elected officials in the cities and the parish for many, many years. do the absolute right thing. And so I think that we should be appreciative of the job that y'all have done.
Thank you. Brett, I can get your microphone.
Just following up on what these guys are saying, what y'all want us to do, and this is a question for the committee as much as you. I don't really like to read. But to digest, from what I understand, you want us to read this thing by May 31st. And I think maybe we could, and I'm not wanting just to meet, trust me, that's the last thing I want to do. But I kind of feel that maybe if we would take a couple of articles at a time and digest that and talk about those articles instead of jumping all around. I'm asking, not telling. But to go through it and really do it right, I just feel that may be necessary.
Why don't I send an email out to everybody and maybe you can respond back if you'd be interested in some type of meeting?
Well, I don't mind responding to that. As a private citizen, I welcome that. Different stakeholders that's here. And hopefully through this whole process, I'm going to understand that's right. That, as development and stuff come in, just what all goes on behind the scenes that the private property owner never sees. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I've already put out some people, here people, stuff in the community, trying to do it also.
We appreciate it. Well, why don't you let me look at the logistics of it? Because I know that we have police jurors that are here that would want to participate in any discussion that we would have, and they would definitely want to be in on any type of education that we would do. So why don't you let us look at that as a staff and maybe work out some logistics and get back with all of you?
I'm kind of responding on top of Matt. I'm used to reading this stuff, so it doesn't hurt so bad. But I don't know how you plan to move forward with this, but it might be a nice, a good way to do it is to put it in action and maybe show us 2 or 3 examples of developments, and you go through here and see how this applies to it.
And I apologize, I should have mentioned that in the presentation, but Wes Crane and I will be working on that to present to you at May 31st meeting. Thank you. Jeff, could you pass in the microphone for recording?
I just want to make sure I understand Matt's concern. We were set up to read through the entire thing first, and then we'd come back and talk about sections kind of in sequence. Is that right? And I think what you're saying, Matt, is that we would read a couple of sections and then discuss it?
I would suggest taking the first 1, 2, 3 articles and digesting that. And then talk about that. And then the next meeting, you say, okay, we got to take, we got to handle the next 2 articles or whatever, you want to bust it up. Just to take it all at one time.
Your vision meetings don't work that way. How do you see us going through here step by step?
I think that our intent was for you guys to take it and read it, and then come back to us with areas of concern. Obviously, in a 400-page document that the staff's worked on, and we pretty much believe in everything that's in the book. It's hard for us to decide which points we need to discuss with all of you. So I think that we were hoping that you would take it and read it and come back and say, okay, I have questions on this.
I definitely agree with that. It would seem to me wiser if we were given a smaller section that we could try to drill down to on and discuss, and if there were no issues, we could move on. But it's going to be a mess if we have to go through A to Z without any.
Are you interested in, I'm just thinking, and I have a group of people here that can help me out, but I'm thinking that we would have to meet in this format. It wouldn't be the kind of situation where we'd all just gather around a conference table and discuss it. So
the reasons for why you
Jennifer, it may be, I mean, I know what this is. This is a kit of parts. You can't take it chapter 1, 2, and 3 and then stop. Chapter 2 will send you to chapter 8, and it seems chaotic, but that's what it is. That's why I suggested maybe we should look at some examples of different projects and really see how this gets applied, because it's not a chapter 1, 2, 3 situation. It's
Okay. Well, why don't we plan to still do the May 31st, 5:30 to 7:30 here? We'll work out the scenarios, and then we'll come back to you. And in the meantime, we'll be in contact by phone and by email and see if we can work out an alternative agenda. And then we can decide from that point how we're going to proceed. Would that be acceptable?
And I'm sure I'm speaking for folks here. Correct me if I'm not. We want to do this process justice.
Yeah.
You know, if this thing is as big as it's being told to us, and I get it, we don't need to rush through it, that's for sure.
Wait a long time.
Yeah, we don't need to rush through this. And I know as a property owner, I'm going to have an opportunity, you know, I'm going to need the opportunity to talk to people out there, you know, and see how they feel about this. And that's just going to take some time, but
we wanted to be respectful of your time. I know that when you were contacted originally, that you weren't told that you were going to be on a 6-month tour of duty. So we want to finish this as efficiently as possible. But if we need to change the format or meet more frequently, I think we can work that out. But as I said, why don't you let the staff kind of suggest it and talk to our board members and our police jurors and come back with a new game plan on the 31st. Okay. Sarah, anything else? Anybody I'm missing?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Is there I don't know if I understand, it does jump around and log into. Would it behoove us to have email contact, maybe we have already emails where we can, if I have a comment, I can throw it up there on the wall and somebody can talk about it right now before the next meeting, so we can.
Sort of like a listserv forum?
Yes. I don't know.
I can get with our IT people to see if we can work that out. I don't know that we have anything like that, but we can look into it.
Get everybody has everybody emails and stuff. I don't know. Might save some time down the road.
Well, that's great idea. All great ideas.
And so, so you would pose a question or make a point,
Yeah,
that would be sent to everybody else.
Right. That's it. Oh, there's some paragraph here I don't like, or you like, or whatever. I can throw it up there and everybody can respond and maybe get a ton of stuff out of the way before we even meet.
That's true, consider so, you need to hear me.
Joel, you like that idea?
I appreciate all the conversation. But, would y'all mind if we go ahead and adjourn the meeting and maybe have some follow-up conversations if there's, I appreciate everything.